The WNBA was trying to break Caitlin Clark, but the Indiana Fever just built a shield that the rest of the league isn't ready for. On Tuesday, Stephanie White officially confirmed a massive shift in Caitlin's role, and while ESPN tried to frame it as a way to manage rookie frustration, the coaching staff in Indiana was already busy tearing that lazy narrative to shreds. If you watched even a single game in the first half of the season, you saw the same repetitive nightmare. Caitlin would cross half court, only to be met by two defenders trapping her near the logo. The officials would conveniently swallow their whistles, and suddenly, the generational talent was forced to fight through a wrestling match just to initiate a basic offensive set. The national media watched those sequences and decided she was struggling to adapt to the grown woman strength of the league. Sue Bird even went on a podcast to talk about role usage, and the major networks echoed it as veteran wisdom. They painted a picture of a tired, overwhelmed rookie who needed the basketball every second just to survive the pressure. But let's be real here, that was just the easy story for the pundits to sell. If Caitlin looked exhausted, the critics claimed she hit the rookie wall. If she passed out of a double team, the veterans said she was playing passive. But the fans sitting inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse weren't buying it. They saw a player getting battered for 94 feet because opponents knew the referees would ignore the fouls. Fever fans knew Caitlin didn't need a reduced role. She needed a scheme that stopped letting defenses dictate the terms of engagement. This brings us right back to the moment Stephanie White actually confirmed the move to an off-ball role, and why that old media narrative was dead wrong from the jump. White didn't walk into that press room to announce her star needed protection. She didn't say Caitlin was overwhelmed by the pros. Instead, she looked at the tape and performed a surgical structural adjustment. White wants two ball handlers on the floor at all times, and that changes the geometry of the entire game. By having a second guard like Kelsey Mitchell or Raven Johnson bring the ball up against a full-court press, the game shifts. It stops opponents from turning every possession into a physical brawl before the offense even sets up its first screen. When Mitchell initiates the action, Caitlin starts the play away from the primary trap. She relocates. She sprints off a staggered screen. She catches the pass in open space, while the defense is already frantically scrambling to recover. That off-ball motion is a literal nightmare for defensive coordinators, because when Caitlin moves without the rock, defenders start to panic. They overreact. They follow her to the wing like she's magnetic. And suddenly, Aaliyah Boston has a wide-open lane to the rim. Fever fan groups lit up the second White explained this two-handler system. The comment sections were flooded with the same sentiment. The girl is finally free. This is the exact part the national media completely missed. Stephanie White isn't limiting Caitlin. She is turning her into a weapon that you physically cannot trap. Once she gives the pass up early, the opposing defense loses its primary target point. You can trap a point guard standing at the top of the key. It's easy. But you cannot trap a shooting guard who is sprinting baseline to baseline behind a pair of heavy, bone-jarring screens. The moment Caitlin gives up possession, the defense is forced to make a choice, and in this league, they almost always choose wrong. The actual shooting stats back this up in a way that's impossible to ignore. Early in the year, Caitlin was forced to create almost all of her three-point looks off the dribble, while defenders stayed glued to her hip. But as the offensive flow shifted toward this new motion, she started hitting more catch-and-shoot threes. She went from 32% of her threes coming off the catch to a staggering 45% later in the year. She didn't find those numbers by accident. The Indiana coaching staff designed them. They drew up specific actions where she gives the pass away, fades into the corner, and pops out the very second the defense turns its head to track the ball. That is how a smart franchise protects a generational player. You don't tell her to shoot less. You get her better shots by making the defense work twice as hard. When the news first broke, the major outlets tried to keep the controversy alive by putting Sue Bird's comments side by side with Caitlin's early frustration. ESPN tried to treat Bird's analysis as normal veteran commentary, while Fox and Yahoo pushed even more heat into the fire, looking for a way to pit the established legend against the skyrocketing new star. But Stephanie White brought the entire conversation back to the floor. She didn't need to launch a public attack on the old guard to win the argument. She answered the noise by treating Caitlin as non-negotiable. That is the part that truly bothers the establishment. Because if Indiana commits to this, the usual talking points start losing oxygen. You can't keep calling Caitlin a sideshow when her own coach is talking about her as the undisputed focal point of the entire system. That confirmation proves the Sue Bird narrative was fundamentally flawed. Bird talked about Caitlin's influence and the pressure of being a rookie, but White confirmed Caitlin is the focal point, whether she's holding the ball or not. White made it clear that Clark can handle the rock while also forcing an entire defense to shift without taking a single dribble. Honestly, it feels like the veteran media just doesn't know how to talk about this kind of skill set yet. They want to put her in a traditional box. They want to label her as a high-usage point guard who has to dominate possession to be effective. But the tape shows a player who racked up 337 assists while leading her own roster in movement away from the play. Sue Bird controlled games through precision and low turnovers. That was her lane, and she was brilliant at it. But Caitlin's rookie profile is stretching the game in a completely different direction. While Bird owned the ball, Clark has shown she can own the empty space around the ball just as effectively. You can run an entire offense through Caitlin without the ball ever touching her hands in the initiation phase. That is a massive distinction that casual viewers might miss, but opposing coaches notice it the second they have to call a timeout because their defense is in shambles. Fever fans recognize the unwritten contract happening on the court right now. Indiana isn't building an offense to hide Caitlin from tough matchups. They are building an offense to punish teams that try to bully her with cheap shots. When opponents try to pick her up for 94 feet, Kelsey Mitchell runs the point. But when teams try to face guard her in the half court, Indiana responds by running staggered screens until the defender's legs literally give out. This is basic basketball geometry. You stretch the floor so wide that the double team breaks because the help defender has too much ground to cover. We have seen this officiating issue in the WNBA before. The Carrington eye poke, the Mabry shove, the league has consistently allowed defenders to play extra rough against Caitlin without calling the foul. So Stephanie White took the physical element out of the initiation phase entirely. She moved the starting line so Caitlin doesn't have to absorb a hit just to pass the ball. The Indiana offense is adding layers now. The first action goes to Mitchell. The second goes to Boston. Only then does Caitlin start her movement. The ball swings, the defense rotates, and someone is inevitably late to the spot. That is how Indiana becomes harder to trap, harder to scout, and harder to bully. They aren't making Caitlin smaller. They are making the floor much, much bigger around her. This isn't experimental. You don't accidentally build spacing like that, and you don't accidentally run third and fourth actions with that kind of timing. You plan it, you drill it, and you commit to it even when it looks messy. Stephanie White isn't just tweaking things around the edges, she is reshaping how this offense thinks about itself. The Hawkeye family watching this unfold knows exactly what this unlocks, because they've seen Caitlin thrive in motion before. They've seen her punish defenders who lose track of her for even half a second. Now that version is being layered into a professional system with more spacing and more experience. You can feel the entire league adjusting in real time. Defenders don't relax when she gives the ball up. They don't sag off her. They follow her every step, and every second they do that, someone else is standing wide open. If the league office refuses to protect her, the team has to build a schematic shield. Kathy Engelbert and the WNBA executives watched Caitlin take flagrant hits all season and offered zero structural protection. Since the league wouldn't step in, White built a tactical shield instead. You don't need the referees to blow the whistle if the defender can't even catch the player they're trying to foul. When the system changes, everyone on the roster eats. Boston gets deeper post touches because the help defender is too terrified to leave Caitlin open in the corner. Mitchell gets downhill driving lanes because her primary defender is caught watching Caitlin relocate. Lexi Hull gets backdoor cuts, and that's why her production spiked. You can see the locker room buying into this shift. The veterans know exactly who stirs the drink. Kelsey Mitchell has publicly credited Caitlin for opening up the floor, while Aaliyah Boston acts as the ultimate enforcer inside. The media tried to push a story that the Fever locker room was divided, but you don't see a team execute complex off-ball actions if they resent their star. They are running these sets because they know it gets everyone paid. This is about Caitlin breaking the defensive rules for everybody else wearing an Indiana jersey. That is the true value of off-ball gravity. The defense has to account for her, even when she's standing 30 feet from the hoop. Watch this closely. Opposing coaches are now calling real timeouts just to adjust to a player who doesn't even have the ball. It happens every game now. A defender shades too high, a rotation arrives a second late, and suddenly, it's an easy layup for Indiana. That sequence doesn't show up as an assist in Caitlin's box score, but she created those points just by being a threat. Stephanie White's comment about Caitlin playing with joy is the ripple effect of this. It's not some abstract theory. It's happening in pieces every night. And the more it shows up, the harder it gets to push that old, tired media narrative. The numbers don't support the idea that she's one-dimensional. The coaching approach disproves it every single night. When someone drops 19 points and leads the league in assists, you don't shrink that production. You shape it. You stretch it. You find ways to make defenses panic even when she isn't touching the leather. The contract is simple. Trust the system, and the system amplifies you. White asked for shared control, not less control. Let Kelsey Mitchell initiate. Let Aaliyah Boston touch it early. Let the offense breathe. And then, when the defense relaxes for half a beat, Caitlin strikes. Clean. Predictable only in its brilliance. The veterans who complained about Caitlin's fan attention all summer are real quiet now. They wanted her to prove she could play within a team system. Well, she's playing within the system, and that system is tearing their defensive coverages apart. You can't keep acting like Clark's supporters are making things up when the Fever themselves acknowledge the outside noise she carries. The media wants a feud, but the Fever care about spacing. They care about keeping Caitlin fresh for the fourth quarter. If you run a player into a brick wall for 30 minutes, her legs go dead, her deep shot falls short. White knows that, so she spreads the duties around. She lets Caitlin breathe for 5 seconds, and then she lets her strike. Bird made a career off pacing from the top of the key, but Clark is expanding that kind of control. She is making the league pick its poison, and whatever they pick, something else is left wide open. That mid-season shift in her catch-and-shoot percentage wasn't a random bump. It was hard evidence of adaptation. It was evidence that the focal point was becoming untouchable. The WNBA spent all season trying to put Caitlin Clark in a box, but Stephanie White just made the box disappear. The Fever play again on Friday, and you can bet the national media will still be looking for a crack in the foundation. They'll look for a moment of frustration, or a veteran glare. But while they look for drama, Stephanie White will be holding the clipboard, drawing up the next action that leaves a defender standing in the wrong zip code. Whether the rest of the league finally figures out how to guard the joyful version of Caitlin Clark, we'll just have to wait and see. But right now, the math is on Indiana's side.